Hello everyone, thanks for joining. From XLCubed today we have myself, Gary Crawford, and my colleague Catherine France. So we're obviously living in strange, challenging times at the moment, and I hope our webinar today proves a good use of your time and gives you some ideas moving forward on your reporting environment. In last week's webinar, we had a look at the new charting capabilities introduced in version 10. That webinar is actually available to view on demand for any of you who missed that. Just drop us an email to info@xlcubed.com and we'll be adding it to the resources section on our website shortly. This week we're taking a look at how XLCubed is increasingly being used by organizations alongside their Power BI deployments in a number of different ways. So let's take a look. So Power BI is a strong cloud-based data platform and visualization tool, and of course it's now also available on-premise through Report Server. It's doing well in the market, and Microsoft's licensing model and the tie-in with Office 365 is working well, and it scores highly in Gartner. But what we've found just through market experience is that customers often see some limitations in terms of the self-serve reporting and analytics capabilities. So sometimes you don't need a dashboard or a chart or a highly formatted report. You want direct and flexible access to the numbers themselves. So in the last couple of years, we've seen that pattern repeated quite a lot, where customers find XLCubed after having deployed Power BI looking to fill that self-serve reporting need. And in the last 3 months, for example, we've seen top 10 global players in cosmetics, in telecoms, and in alcoholic drinks acquire XLCubed to augment their Power BI platform. So what is the requirement fundamentally? So essentially, while Power BI addresses the standard reporting and dashboard requirements, or certainly most of them, and does it well, analysts and finance teams often find it lacking for what they would consider self-serve and ad hoc reporting, which is really around that ability to pull the data they want when they need it and without having to ask IT to change an existing report or pull a specific data extract for them. So it's really about where time's of the essence, they need to be able to do it themselves. And once they've accessed the data to answer the question of the day, they need to be able to manipulate that as they choose and to further explore it. So it's not just about, here's the report, it's about, yes, here's the report that answers some questions. Now let me analyze the data to answer other questions that it raises. They need the ability certainly to add their own calculations. They need a tool they can do that with easily without having to learn a specific language. Because while the central model will contain a number of core business calculations, it's never going to contain everything you need in a specific report. They also need a tool fundamentally that is, I would say, training light, something they can pick up and run with and become productive with quickly. They're not really interested in spending 2-3 day training sessions to learn another tool in a bespoke environment. So, and I think that's particularly true for the finance teams, probably, where they want to be able to operate in a tool they're familiar with, which in our case is Microsoft Excel. In many cases, ad hoc reporting is one step away from what becomes a standardized business report. So someone builds an ad hoc report, they build it for a specific use case, and that use case is needed ongoing, and it becomes a standardized report. So where that's the case, they need the ability to be able to share those dashboards effectively across the wider company, rather than just for personal use. So in terms of XLCubed, considering it as a self-serve extension to Power BI, XLCubed will connect directly to data held in powerbi.com or to on-premise report server. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The users, because it's an Excel add-in, the core tool is an Excel add-in, can leverage their existing skills and get up to speed quickly. So they're already predisposed to like the tool because they understand aspects of it before they even start to use it. And it's that combination of connecting Excel to the underlying data and adding degrees of flexibility on top that gives it the overall power. It goes well beyond the pivot table limitations that people are aware of. It adds intuitive calculations, as I mentioned. But on top of all that flexible ability to access the data and manipulate the data, it does provide a wide range of visualization elements, including best practice interactive charting, and the ability, of course, to share the resulting reports back into Power BI reports and dashboards. So first of all, and this is a very, very high level diagram, just trying to explain what we actually do in this environment. The first thing to say that is in some cases, Power BI is being used purely as the client tool to connect to underlying data sources like analysis services, be that in Azure or on-premise, or SAP HANA, Essbase, SQL, and many, many others. And if that's the case, of course, XLCubed can connect directly to those data sources in exactly the same way as Power BI does. Where the data is being held within Power BI itself, XLCubed can connect directly to those models as well. So it's just another data source for XLCubed. It can connect to, in the cloud world, it can connect to the Power BI service. If you have Power BI Premium and it's fully configured, you can connect directly to the relevant URL for your company. It can utilize single sign-on and it can be multi-factor authenticated. If you're not running Premium or the setup is not fully configured, you can use an ODC file to connect through to that data. If you're running Power BI on-premise through Report Server, you can connect to that through our proxy server, because a direct connection to Report Server is not currently possible. So we've got a proxy server to facilitate that side of things. And when it comes to integrating XLCubed reports back into Power BI, we have a custom visual to handle that side of things. So essentially you can build in Excel, publish to XLCubed Web, and use our Power BI custom visual to integrate those XLCubed reports or report components within Power BI reports and dashboards. Okay, so we could have a much more complex diagram, obviously, but at a simple level, that's fundamentally what we provide here. So with that, let's move on to the demo side of things. We'll look really at self-serve reporting and analytics from Excel, and then also the report level integration side of things. So if I switch to Excel here, let's just add a connection through to Power BI. So if I add a new connection, you'll see if I was connecting through Premium, I would use the direct URL here. In my case now, I'm just going to use the ODC file approach. So I'll pick up an ODC file, which is basically a connection file, excuse me, and you can pick those up you can download those from Power BI directly. So I'll connect to the database and the model. Okay, and from here you basically have full fat XLCubed running against the Power BI data models. So if we just take a look at some of the capabilities this provides in terms of ad hoc and self-serve side of things, we'll start off by adding a grid, and all the available hierarchies in the model are here down the left-hand side, and it's a case of positioning those where I want within the report. So if we put the products onto rows, we'll position date on columns, and then we shall go for continent, country, measures, of course, and also the promotions as filters to the report. So from here, I can make the selections that I want to choose in each of those. So for the measures, I'm going to just use the sales amount. We'll leave the other three at the top level. For calendar, just based on this sample data set, we're going to go for 2007 through 2009 because they're the ones that have got data. And for product, we can pick, if I just pick several of these product categories. And what I wanted to mention here specifically is that there's no restrictions in terms of the order in which you can pick things. And also, if you want to select items at different levels of a hierarchy and mix them in the middle, again, there's no restriction. You can choose exactly what you want to see in that scenario. Okay, so here's my simple grid. And from here, I can drill down through additional levels of detail as I choose, just on a double click. And I can, of course, filter the data however I choose as well. I'm actually just going to bring up the task pane to do that. So if I want to filter by continent, I can select continent here, drag that across. The numbers are filtered by continent. Now they're back to everything again. When it comes to slice and dice, I can essentially do that by any element within the hierarchy. So if I, for example, want to slice this by country, I can click on country, move that down, nest it above product, drill into that, and I've got my product split by country. I think my network connection is struggling a little bit here today. Actually, I think it was my double click was struggling. So you can see I've drilled down, I've got the product split by country. If I'm particularly interested, let's say in maybe Canada, France, Germany, we've got quick filters to allow you to restrict the data by that selection. So I can keep just those members. And you can see I've got that now split by the 3. Or we could choose to move the country split onto columns and look at that within calendar. So I've got the year and then the 3 countries split within that. So simple slice and dice capability, nice and easy to use, all very much standard stuff. Okay, so I wanted to talk just in brief about some of the selection flexibility that we give you. So when I click on product here, which is currently on rows, I'll just clear the current selection. We can select an individual item. So if I select home appliances, you can see there's a number of groupings underneath that. But maybe what I'd actually like to see is the lowest level products that filter up into home appliances. And that's the sort of thing you can do very, very quickly here through the drop-down menu, where I can say show in this case, the lowest descendants. And that's actually a dynamic selection, which is that will change as the underlying data changes. So if we've got 300 products today and 310 tomorrow, the report will grow to reflect that. So you can easily make dynamic selections on the data. And there's really a lot of flexibility within that dialog. But the other thing I specifically wanted to mention is XLCubed really sits very tightly within Excel. It integrates tightly. It's not just sitting on top as a little island like a pivot table. It understands the rest of Excel. And we actually have a range picker here, which means that we could use one Excel cell or a range of Excel cells to drive this selection. So in my case, I've got a list of products which have run out of stock, essentially, which are out of stock. And I can choose to report on those products just based off an Excel range, as you've seen just now. So the grid refreshes based on that list of products, which is just doing a text match. And if I go back now and add some additional items into that range, you'll see that the grid will update directly based on that range having changed. So that real deep integration with Excel fundamentally means that it's opening up the whole flexibility of Excel to you as an analyst or you as a finance user. It allows you to bring data from different systems together quickly, effectively, and actually very, very easily as well. So if I clear that selection and just drill down into product again, the next thing really I wanted to talk about was how we allow you to add your own calculations quickly and easily. So let's take a simple case. We want to see the growth in 2008. We can just go to the ribbon here, add a column calculation, and we can call that whatever you choose. So if I just call this percentage growth, and then down beneath, I can say that that's equal to 2008 minus 2007 divided by 2007. Just a standard Excel formula. And that's kind of the point, that as long as you remember to add the calculation from the ribbon, all you're then doing is adding a standard Excel formula, which end users obviously understand, they already know, and I can choose to format that however I choose. And that calculation is dynamic with the grid. So if I drill down into it, you see the calc carries down through. And if I was to split the columns by, let's say, promotions, and drill into promotions, I'm going to get that calculation for each split within the promotions hierarchy. So you can see it here for no discounts and here for the store discounts. Okay, so it gives you something that's very familiar in terms of adding it, but something that's highly flexible and will change with the underlying data. And we add different types of calculation too. Another example would be we want to create a grouping which doesn't exist in the underlying data. We can do that in the UI here just by grouping them together. We've got music and TV, so we call that music TV. I'm sure someone's done that before in the 80s, but we create a member called music TV, and that's now available right throughout this workbook for me to report on. So we do give easy to use yet powerful calculation flexibility to true business end users. There's no need to learn any special language, DAX, whatever it may be. You can do it all directly within Excel. In addition to the ability to add calculations, etc., we give you a quick way to get behind the numbers too. And by that, I just mean in this grid, perhaps we don't like the look of the 728K number for cell phones. We'd expect it to be higher, lower, whichever it might be. In that case, we can run something called a breakout. And a breakout is essentially number decomposition. So I can choose to split that number out by any other hierarchy in the cube. And in this case, we're going to split that out by country. So that's going to give me a breakdown split out by country, so the top 10 countries and then everything else at the bottom. And we can see the US is making up 34% of the total, Iran 20K, but if I sum these all up, including others, we've got the 728 number that we started from. So it's a quick way to analyze a specific data point, and actually it's dynamically tied to the grid. So as I navigate around the grid, this will update to give me the breakdown by the new cell that's of interest for me. So breakout really is number decomposition, but done in a very simple way. It gives you a quick, easy way to understand what's going on behind the numbers. Aside from that kind of self-serve pulling the numbers back, we do provide a powerful ranking and filtering capability within XLCubed, which I just want to give you a taste of when running against Power BI data. So I've got a template report here, which I've added. We're looking at products and we're looking at the sales amount. So let's say we want to create a hit and miss or a top and flop report, what's doing well, what's doing badly. There's other names as well for those, but let's go with the polite ones. So here I can say, if I go to the product selector, I can go to the advanced part of the dialog and I can choose to rank that result. It's opened on the wrong screen, but I can say top 10, bottom 10, whatever it might be. I'll just actually link it to the cell here. So we want a top 5 and I want to base that on the sales amount measure. So here's my top 5. And then alongside that, we want to combine a second set of data, which is going to show me the same product, but this time we're going to rank that as a bottom 5. So bottom 5. And again, we need to just choose that measure. So we'll rank it by the sales amount. Okay, so you see I've got my top 5 and my bottom 5. That is drillable, that's filterable by anything at the top here. So if I was to move continent down onto rows and then drill into continent, you'll see I've got the top bottom 5 split for each of the 3 continents, and that's all dynamically driven from this cell. So if I change it to 3, it's a top and bottom 3. If I change it to 10, it's a top and bottom 10. So it gives you a lot of power to really analyze the numbers and present them how you choose. The last thing in terms of pulling the data through from Power BI into XLCubed is we do provide, alongside the grids, which most people use most of the time, we do provide a formula model. So you can essentially take a grid and you can convert it to formula. And that ends up in a model where each cell has got a specific formula behind it. So if any of you are familiar with something like TM1, roughly the equivalent of DBR formulas there. The benefit that the formula gives you is that because it understands what value to retrieve from the data, you can position it in any cell. So I can move it over here, change the selection to be, just do it for the whole of 2014. And you can see that this value updates too. So that allows you then to lay reports out in any layout you choose, anything you can do in standard Excel. So when it comes to your core financial reports, if you wanted a column by column balance sheet layout, something like this, you can do that. If you wanted just a highly formatted straight up and down balance sheet, you can do that. But having built something like this, and with the flexibility it gives you, if I want to repeat that across multiple sheets for different parts of the organization, I can quickly do that just using the propagate capability. So you can see I've got additional sheets now for each of those divisions within the workbook. So those are the two primary ways to retrieve information from Power BI through XLCubed. In addition to those, we have a number of financially focused chart types which are available to use, many of which are not available in native Power BI certainly. And anything you do in the Excel add-in can be published to XLCubed Web and ultimately shared in Power BI through the custom visual. And if we just have a very quick look at that just now, I really just wanted to show you a grid which has been published and is made available in Power BI through the custom visual. So it's a grid just like we were looking at a few minutes ago in Excel, but obviously now rendered within Power BI. You see here I can drill down as I need to. I can also slice and dice that data. So let's slice it by customer segment, drill into the customer segment and further down here. And then lastly, I can add a calculation as I choose in much the same way as I did in Excel. So if I call this Q1, and I'm going to say it's equal to January plus February plus March. So it gives you that slice dice capability directly within Power BI and also the ability to easily add custom calculations as and when you need them. And sometimes customers will use these with parameterized links from an existing Power BI report so that you can go into the deeper context using an XLCubed grid of the area in the Power BI report which was of interest. So what I'm going to do now is pass across to my colleague Catherine, who's going to talk a little bit more about how you actually integrate things at a report level within Power BI, so using some XLCubed content within a Power BI report. So Catherine, over to you.
Great, thank you, Gary. Yes, so what I want to show you today is how we can integrate an XLCubed report that we've published to XLCubed Web and integrate it into a Power BI report. So here I've got a sort of pre-built, half-built existing reports. I've got a few slices, one for continent, one for promotion. I've also just got a simple bar chart which is showing me my sales amounts by category. So I'm going to jump over into Excel. Now here I've got a very simple XLCubed dashboard. I've got a dynamic chart on the left here and an XLCubed grid. Out of interest, this chart here is one of our new chart types from version 10. It's an integrated variance chart. So I'm showing currently the difference between the actual and the budget sales amount values over my months. So we can see that the black columns here go up and show my actual values. And then I also see either a red or green arrow showing me how that varies from my budget amount. So my goal here is to integrate this dashboard in alongside my Power BI report that I've already got. I also want it so that when I click a filter on my Power BI report or an element, it's going to filter down into this XLCubed report and show the updated data. So to do that, I've created some parameters, which is driving the elements on this dashboard. So on this sheet here, I've got a few parameters set up. These three here are of particular interest. These are going to be the ones that my Power BI report populates. Now to do this, I need to set up web parameters. In the XLCubed, we go to the ribbon and find our parameters menu here. So I've already created these, but if you were to do it from scratch, you would need to use this menu item here. You select the cell that the parameter belongs to and give it a name. The naming convention needs to match what is in Power BI, so we'll see that later on once we insert the report. So for now, I've just named it continent, and accordingly, the others are called country and promotion. So once this is integrated into Power BI, I'm going to change slicer selections or interact with the Power BI elements, and it's going to populate these cells here. I've also got a few other cells that my XLCubed elements output to. So if I quickly just demonstrate, if I look at how this chart here is built, in the task pane, for example, if I look at what the continent is doing, it's being driven from that Excel range parameters B2. So whenever that cell changes, the chart will update. Initially, these are blank, which just means that it's going to be showing the highest level member, the all member. So once you've got that all set up, you need to publish that report to your website. So I've already done that. So I'm just going to go back into my Power BI report now. So if I go in and edit the report, I'm going to insert my XLCubed visual from the visualizations pane here. And we see that we get a visual control. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. Now to get this to render something, we first need to update our parameters. So I'm just going to go ahead and select those. So I know that I need the continent. I also want the country, and I want the promotion. So now here we can see how those names were relevant. So I've got those three parameters, which are the same as the names for the web parameters that I defined in XLCubed. So once I've got those, I can move over into the visual, and I use this button to find my report. So once I select that, we see that it opens up the XLCubed repository. So I'm just going to navigate to my published report, which is that one there. Great, so once that's loaded, I'm just going to resize to make it look a little bit better. So I'm going to fit that in about there. So if we examine how this is behaving now, we can see that we've got the same Power BI components, but alongside that, we've got our XLCubed report, which is appearing exactly as it did in Excel. So if I start to make some changes to my slices here, so for example, I'm going to select Europe. So not only did that update my Power BI chart, but it's also updated my XLCubed reports. So we can see that this chart is now being filtered by Europe, and this grid here is only showing European countries. It's going to happen the same way if I change my promotion. I'm now only seeing the months relevant to that promotion I've selected. So I'm just going to undo that so we see all the months again. It's also going to behave the same if I click an element on this chart. So for example, if I select the country Germany, now both my chart and my grid are only showing data for Germany. Now these components are still interactive, just as they were before. So I can hover over, I see tooltips, I can drill into this chart and see a breakdown for all my products. If I select something on this chart, it's going to still drill down onto my grid here. So I can select, I just want to view the cell phone data, and I only want to view it for the month of August. And now my numbers have updated accordingly. This grid on the right is still interactive as we saw earlier, so I can still drill into this. I can slice and dice, I can move my hierarchies over if I so wished. So you can see we've got the remaining interactivity, nothing's changed, but it's integrated alongside my Power BI elements. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to show you. So I'm going to pass back over to Gary.
Thanks, Catherine. Well done on timing too. I know I spoke for a little bit longer than I had said I would do, so thanks for that. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. I hope that's been useful today. And we did have a couple of questions come through. So actually just three, but the first was, is the custom visual part of XLCubed Web? No, it isn't, but it's licensed as part of XLCubed Web. So if you, we need to provide you with a visual which is specifically for your organization. So if you just want to drop us an email, we can follow up with that. Can it connect to Power BI Desktop? Yes, it can, but in a single user mode, essentially. Actually, the other question was a duplicate. So those are the only questions we've had through on the chat. If you do have any other questions, if you email us to info@xlcubes.com, we'll be happy to help. And otherwise, I hope that's been interesting and useful for you. Thanks very much for your time.